It's time for more coaching and coffee talk. Today, I'm super excited to have Kevin Ramirez here. He is a husband, a father of 2 daughters, and a survivor of 3 Widowmaker heart attacks, which has ignited his passion to cut through misconceptions surrounding heart disease and disseminate useful information to those at risk of heart disease, which he's doing over Instagram and other platforms. And we'll link to all that here. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. Like I was saying before, when we had a quick chat before we started, you're the guy in the space that really kind of drew me. I couldn't find anybody else that resonated with me, especially I find your micro workout tag is just brilliant. That's one of the most powerful tags that really stuck with me. And then of course, we're in the same age demographic.
Yeah.
So, and then the fact that you're in such good shape, I think there's not enough guys. There's more of them now, but there's not enough guys in our age demographic that are taking care of themselves. There's too many examples of guys that don't.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you. And yeah, because I really saw that with you too, because we're in the same age group, and also you are in very good shape yourself, and you probably went through the same thing I did, which is the people around you are like, what? This guy's having a heart attack? I'm screwed, right?
Yeah. Did you have the experience? Because this is something I've had to battle. As I've said in some of my content, I've had now on my 7th cardiologist out of in 3 countries. And every cardiologist that I've seen has literally at some point looked at me and gone, you're not having a heart attack, or no, you're fine. I'm sure you're fine. Like from the moment I walked in, after boxing in Mexico, I was in Merida. After boxing, I finally realized I've got 3 of the many symptoms of a heart attack, and show up at the hospital, and the doctor at the ER is going, no, I'm sure you're not having a heart attack, but come on in, let's do some blood work and an EKG. Then he gets the EKG and he goes, well, there's a little something there, but no, you can't be having a heart attack. Let's just wait till the cardiologist has a look at the blood work. And then like 7 minutes later, the cardiologist comes flying around the curtain. He's like, you're not going anywhere. You're having a heart attack. And in my brain, I'm going, my name, or talking about me and heart attack, same sentence. That I'm like, how I can't make this stick. I'm like, pardon? He goes, you're having a heart attack. You're going into surgery in less than 30 minutes. I said, pardon? Who? Me?
Yeah.
It didn't. In hindsight, and I don't know.
It still doesn't, right? It still doesn't. I had an episode like that this week where I woke up and it was like, I cannot believe this happened. I'm still doing that 2.5 years later, you know.
Oh, wow. It's been 2.5 years for you. But that, I guess, it shows in the level of workout that you're doing as well. I was stunned, and I continue to be stunned by the lack of uncertainty and the unknowns. Like there's so much known. I think you and I kind of agree in the stuff that we've read from Kendrick. But there's so much other unknowns. Like if you were to talk to all of the cardiologists, like in all 7 cardiologists I've spoken to, none of them would go like, hey, you know what? You need a carotid IMT or a femoral IMT or an ankle brachial index to determine where your cardiovascular disease is at today. And we need to do that again in 6 months or a year. There are cardiologists that believe that, but they are not the norm working in the field. And I don't know what it's like in Denmark, because I'm sure that my experience with the Danish system is you guys have such great systems over there with a smaller population. I don't know, what's
well, it's, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a great country to have a heart attack in. I'm very grateful. First of all, I had mine in a shopping mall, so I had it in the perfect place too. There were people that helped me right away. But part of my story was also that I went to the doctor with chest pains, and they sent me right to the hospital. You know, gave me a couple of aspirin, said, "Hey, we think you need to get checked out. We're sending you to the hospital. Don't panic." Okay. And I went there and I sat there all day, and they did this, you know, what they probably did on you, the troponin test, where they measure the level of this enzyme in your blood if your heart's not getting enough blood, and some areas. And sometimes it was raised, sometimes it wasn't. and they sent me home. And I know a part of that was also, like you mentioned, that, this kind of a thought that this guy's in great shape, he's not having a heart attack, and 4 days later, I dropped, in the mall, and it was not like something's going on, I need to call the doctor. It was like, I don't even remember it. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then also, also it didn't take long for me to come to the conclusion that cardiology is mostly guesswork. Sorry if there's any cardiologists out there, but I say the same thing to cardiologists. I said, this is mostly guesswork, isn't it? You guys really don't know what causes heart attack. Well, it runs in your fat. Yeah, but what causes this, and that's why I love that you were mentioning Malcolm Kendrick for people that don't know him, talking about this process, that heart disease is a process, that different things can feed into it, but it's this thing of the endothelial layer in the artery getting damaged. Stuff comes in to repair it, like cholesterol, which is our friend. It's trying to help repair the spot, and then it gets smaller, and other things like smoking, like stress, cortisol, tears at the lining, and this is the process, and different things can cause it. And he goes also into like sickle cell anemia and stuff, that with these, when the red platelets are actually like
Damaging,
scythes and cutting it up. But I was like, wow, this is the first time this makes sense. He's talking about a process. He's talking about it's covering all the bases where all these things are feeding into it. And this actually makes sense, And because of that, what happened with me is I went off all of my heart medications. I decided to do that because I was like a zombie on all these medications, like I'm sure I didn't have high blood pressure. I had a low resting heart rate, and it would just brought me down. Like, to have something lowering my blood pressure and lowering my heart rate, I was like, by 11:30 in the morning, I was taking my first nap. I mean, it was really bad. And I was taking like 3 or 4 naps a day, and I was like useless to my kids and my wife, And so, but if you go off your meds, then you don't get to see the cardiologist anymore in Denmark. That's part of how the socialized healthcare works. So I actually don't see a cardiologist. Luckily I have a doctor that I've done some work with through I don't know if you saw, I'm going back and getting a master's degree in integrated food studies. And I've done some work with a doctor in my neighborhood, and we have a great, relationship. So, we talk about everything. But anyway, that's part of me. But let's hear the whole story, because I think it's important just to hear people's stories, and I would love to hear it.
Sure.
I'm talking too much.
No. That was selfishly, I wanted to hear your story because I haven't been able to piece it all together from reading your blog and from your videos, and of course Instagram is so short, and I'm fascinated by it because I believe that there's more people like us than not, and a lot of the vast majority of them are not getting good information. This disease, I believe, is either A, fully preventable, or completely treatable with lifestyle, and there's probably some medicines that are useful, although I'm still sorting through. But I'll go over the story, and then maybe we'll touch back on things like stress tests and LDL, cholesterol hypothesis, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So basically my story goes, I take my kids to, I wanted them to learn some Mexican boxing. And then the first time that I was there with them, at the end of the session, my wife's going to me, hey man, you look pale. In 11 years of marriage, I've never seen you look pale. I've seen you look tired, but I've never seen you look pale. And I thought, shoot. I had a little bit of a light ache in the left side of my chest as we're getting in the car. And I was thinking, I probably just strained a muscle. At the same time, a little voice in my head, which I equate with my recently deceased dog at the time, who's been was like my little buddy since before I was married, was saying, no, that's the first sign of a heart attack. And I'm like, not me. Not ignoring completely history in the sense that My dad had a triple bypass done at 51. His brother died at 65 of a massive coronary. His father died at 68 of a massive coronary. On my mother's side, my mother's brother died of a massive coronary at 65. So there's heart attacks on both sides. And I had always said, my dad smoked on and off like a chimney and drank on and off like a fish for many years, and then kind of didn't really get his shit together, so to speak, when it came to smoking and drinking until about 5+ years after his heart attack and triple bypass. And now he's a hardcore vegan, which is, it's really weird. We have horrible discussions on food. But anyways, and he started working out at, he lived with us, I think at the age of 65 with my wife and I, and started training, and I put him on I recommended he speak to his doctor about a low dose of testosterone, TRT. And since then he's been a new man. So back to me, as we're driving away, we decide to drive. A little voice in my head says, don't go to the center of the city, which is where I wanted to take them to this new place. Let's go out of town in my head towards the hospitals. And we stop at a place we normally went to. And as we're getting food pickup, because it's COVID, you can't go inside. I get out of the car because I'm feeling antsy. I can't sit still. And I'm leaning over the roof of the car. I'm thinking, man, why do I feel like crap? And and that voice in my head goes, anxiety, really deep, like impending sense of doom is another sign of a heart attack. And I'm like, listen, I haven't been working for a year. I don't have a lot of money. I can't afford to just walk into a hospital here because it's pay for service in Mexico. And I'm not going to, just for some dog.
Cat. She jumped up and hung on my chest. I know. Two kittens we got running around.
You gotta love
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's all good. And so I'm talking myself out of it. And then my chest pain was getting worse. I thought, I'm just going to go home. I'm going to have a cold shower and I'm going to pop a couple Advil and I'm going to sleep this off. I get back in the car and we start driving and I get a shooting pain down my left arm. And I'm like, okay, that's enough. Now this is silly and you can't ignore this. So I tell my buddy who's driving, I said, hey, where's the closest hospital? And he goes, well, there's a hospital 3 minutes away, but it's like the most expensive hospital in the city. It's like where medical tourism happens. And then he goes, and there's another one, it's about 20 minutes away, but that's kind of semi-private. And I'm like, let's just go to the expensive one. Let's find out right away. So we roll up there, and just like I told you, I walked up, get through, tell the security guy in Spanish what's going on. He gets the doctor. They bring me in, put me on a bed. He's like, yeah, there's no chance that you're having a heart attack. And then he's, looking at the EKG. He's like, well, there's something there, but nothing. And then of course the whole thing unfolds with the doctor. And then it was strange. I was pretty calm. Like I didn't think I was going to die or anything. But I was like, okay, I need to say goodbye to my kids because I need to say a few words to my kids. And he's like, well, how old are your kids? I'm like, well, they're 6 and 8. He goes, well, they can't come in here because of COVID. I said, listen to me. I said, if you don't let me bring my kids in here to say a few words to them, I said, I'm going to get off this table and I'm going to walk outside and I'm going to talk to my kids. So one way or the other, I'm talking to them. And he's like, okay, well, put a mask on them and you got 2 minutes. I'm like, okay. So while my wife's getting them, and poor her, she's, struggling to wrap her head around what's happening. I calmly pick up the phone, thinking I'm pretty calm. I try to reach my sister. I can't. Try to reach my dad. I can't. I reach my mom and I just come say, hey, mom. And I was super calm for a second. Like, hey, mom, I'm okay, but I'm in a hospital. I'm having a heart attack. And just in case it doesn't work out, I want you to know I've had a great life and I love you. And she starts bawling.
Oh, jeez.
Of course, I thought I had it under control because I was trying to give her some sense of, like, if I died, I wanted her to have a sense of it's been okay. Like, I'm accepting of this because I've done everything. I've done so many things. I've left a good life. I have a great family. I love you guys. And she started crying and it crushed me. As son, the link between sons and mothers and fathers and daughters and all that.
Yeah.
So then they bring my daughters in and I lied to them, which I think is normal for many people. I say, hey, dad's having a heart attack. I'm going to go into surgery. I'm going to come out and everything's going to be fine. And I regretted it. And I made sure I corrected that after, because I've seen so many young women as I grew up that had bad relationships with their fathers in particular, that led them to always be seeking attention from the wrong kind of man in many cases. So I didn't want to contribute to that. If that's the way, if I died that day, I didn't want them to say, well, my dad is some part of their brain. Well, my dad promised he was coming back and he didn't. So that really bothered me after, and it's something that I had to fix. So then they wheel me into surgery, and they said, you want to be, put under, or do you want to be awake? I'm like, awake, of course. So he goes, okay, we're going to go in through the radial artery. We're going to do all this. You can watch it on the screen. And I got to talk to the anesthesiologist, the nurses, the doctors through the whole thing as I watched them go and do the whole process. Wow. Yeah. Place the plate, balloon me open, place the stent, all that stuff. And I came out of that experience wanting to jump off the bed and go for a run. Like, I felt so good because I must have been living with a 60% blockage right at the bifurcation of the LAD. That had been there building for about 10 years. And the only symptom that I had, that I had in hindsight was what I thought was hyperhidrosis. So I had increasingly worse and worse sweating problems over a decade. And my exercise tolerance, like I could handle exercise, but I would sweat like incredibly profusely for nothing. I would leave a pool of sweat wherever I was training. And it was strange. I was like, wow, why is this getting so much harder? But anyways, I came out of it feeling great, and hubris gets in the way. And I had just landed a job and I needed to be able to start it in a month. And so I was talking to the guy in charge of the cardiology team. I'm like, hey, listen, man, I feel great. I need to be able to get cleared to go to work. I don't even know why I said that, because I should have just avoided it. Stress tests, I think, just to segue, I think are a really bad idea. We already know that you've stressed your heart when you've had a heart attack, and that when you usually the process of stressing your heart caused that cholesterol lesion or whatever to rupture and then lead to a blockage. Why the hell would you then take a person and stress test them to what? Cause another heart attack? And if you didn't, all you proved is that his arteries or her arteries survived that stress test, because that's all you're proving. It's a momentary test, like a pressure test of piping or equipment in a factory somewhere. But I didn't think about it that way. And I owe that thought process to a guy called Zachariah Salazar, who has been a mentor of mine over many years. Great guy, shout out to him. So I pushed them, in a sense, to clear me, which involved the stress test and rehab. And they agreed to accelerate my rehab from 30 days to 15 days and do it at a really high pace because of the shape I was in. But it had to start with a stress test. So 15 days after my first heart attack, I go to do it. This is December 4th. I did some blood work in the morning, and I go to the clinic, which happened to be about 15, 20 minutes from that other hospital that I had mentioned that was partly private. And they put me on a treadmill, and they just crank that thing eventually up to the point where my heart's doing 178 beats a minute. Now, as a 50-year-old guy at that time, you would have thought that would have been contraindicated. But I feel like there was a money component where there was money to be made for so the cardiologist's friend is the cardiac rehab physician. He's got a clinic, and they make money every time you show up. So they're going to charge me to go every day, and they're going to do this stress, and all this stuff has a cost to it, which is understandable. People need to get paid, but the thought should always be what's best for the patient. And and I think the whole concept of stress tests are horrible. But anyways, I digress. So after I finished the stress tests, and this is based on RPE, so rate of perceived exertion, I got to 178, and I could have gone more. They dial the machine back, take me off. I catch my breath. I'm sitting there. The lady starts a coaching program about nutrition and all this stuff. And we're having a talking about 10 minutes after I get off the treadmill, 10, 15 minutes, I get jaw pain that I've never had. And I went like this, and I looked up at her. I said, I think you better get the doctor. I said, I think I'm having another heart attack, and I need the following medications. And I started listing off aspirin and a bunch of others. And she's like, what? I'm like, go get the doctor. I think I'm having a heart attack, but you can't be. Trust me, get the doctor. So she goes running out. And as she's gone, I kind of leaned over because it felt like somebody had taken like a vampire movie steak and just gone boom.
Ooh.
And I went, oh, and I leaned over, and I remember leaning over my left leg and my vision starting to tunnel. And I remember clear as a bell saying, I am not dying on this Mexican clinic floor today. I am not dying today. There's no way I'm dying today. I got a family to get back to, I got my daughters, and I'm leaning over and the world's tunneling in. And I managed to grab the seat arm, and I kind of start pulling myself back up as she runs back in with the doctor. They help me up and they lay me down on the bed. And my mantra was, slow your heart, slow your breathing. And that's the pace I was using inside my head. And I'm calmly, with my eyes mostly shut, telling the doctor, listen, I need this, 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 and this. And he's like, yeah. And he's popping pills out of the medication slips or whatever, and the blisters packs. And I'm chewing aspirin, and he's getting stuff, and they're calling an ambulance. And then it's like Laurel and Hardy on the ambulance team show up, and they're like, all right, I guess we're here to do it. Like, it was just a clown show. Oh, no. So they finally load me up in the ambulance, and then the doctor gets in with me, and he's trying to keep me calm, but I'm calm. I'm just like, I'm not dying. I'm not gonna let myself die. And we drive to the hospital, and the idiots dropped me at the wrong door. So I got two attendants. I'm on the gurney, and I've got the doctor, and then they're arguing with each other like, hey, we're at the wrong door. Well, do we wait for the ambulance to come back, or do we go up the elevator and across the bridge? And I'm like, I wanted to reach over and grab one of them by the neck and bring him. I look at him, and in Spanish, I said, listen, man, you need to take me up the elevator and across the bridge. We need to go fast because I'm having a heart attack. Oh yeah, good idea. I'm like, so we get over there, and the surgical team was exactly the same surgical team I'd had the first time. And they were waiting for me. They were ready because he'd called ahead and everything. So everything was ready to go. And they rolled me straight into surgery. Same question. Do you want to be knocked out? Do you want to watch? I said, I want to watch. I said, hey, don't I know you guys? I was joking with them. I'm like, hey, haven't I seen you guys somewhere before? And we were laughing and having a joke, and they're prepping to go into the radial artery again. And they knocked that all out. And then the surgery was done real quick, and they ballooned me open. They didn't put a second stent in, but they had to order this old drug that they didn't have at the hospital called Aggrastat, I believe. It's a clot buster. So it didn't get there right away. So they had ballooned me open, and they were wheeling me up into intensive care. And I get into the room, and everybody leaves. There's not a nurse, there's nobody in the room. And all of a sudden my jaw starts hurting, and I went, oh, fuck, pardon my language. And then the nurse comes back in. I said, listen, man, you better get the doctor and the team. I said, I'm having another heart attack. He's like, you can't be having another heart attack. You just came out of surgery. I'm like, don't argue with me. Get the doctor. I've got all the same symptoms. So he runs out. Next thing you know, it's like somebody kicked over an anthill, and there's doctors and nurses and people flying into the room. The doctor comes in with his mobile phone to his ear, and he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I have jaw pain, I have chest pain, and I have shooting pain down my arm. I think I'm having another heart attack. He's like, holy crap, let me call the doctors. They've all left. And of course, they've all left in their Ferraris and Porsches. So he gets them back. They wheel me back into the same operating room, surgical room. And now they're like, oh, they're talking. I can hear them talking to each other like, we should go back in through the femoral artery because we've already gone in the radial artery. And I'm thinking to myself, I remember my dad's recovery from them going in through the femoral artery to do his triple bypass or his stents first, and then his recovery from the chest cracking. I'm like, no, why don't you guys just come more proximal on the radial artery and go back in exactly where you went in last time. You already know it, everything, lay of the land, everything's all good. Oh yeah, he's like, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And I'm thinking to myself, why is it that I can tell these guys what medicines to give me and how to do the surgery? I'm boggled that this is happening, but I guess if you talk with authority, people listen. So then the cardiac surgeon comes back in, he does everything. I'm watching the whole thing again. And this time he goes back in, balloons it open, and drops another stent, exactly the same spot. So I got two stents in exactly the same place, right at the bifurcation in the LA. I did exactly the same thing. And so
was the first stent then?
No,
was there a block in the stent? No.
Yeah. What happened though is, so this goes to show you about how the dangers of a little bit of information, or maybe too much information. So I had been on clopidogrel, which is Plavix, which is a very common, I think it's an it's either antiplatelet. I always get the two of them confused because aspirin does one of the two, and the other one is the Plavix, which is
Okay, so you were on a blood clotter.
yeah, or no, a blood. So I was on a blood. I think the aspirin's a blood thinner, and
Yeah.
then the Plavix is a blood coagulant, basically.
Okay, yeah.
Stops platelets from aggregating. I believe that's what it is. So someone, I'm sure, will correct us if we're wrong. I had stopped taking it because I was concerned about the consequences of it. And what I had done was basically multiplied my dose of aspirin by a factor of almost 10. So instead of taking 81 milligrams of aspirin, I was taking a gram of aspirin spread throughout the day and thinking that that would be sufficient. I had also dropped the statins because statins had destroyed my dad's cartilage in his knees and his shoulders. And then I had been off it for a few days before I went and did the stress test. But then a couple of days before the stress test, I thought to myself, I'm about to stress my heart. I should probably take that again. So I had started taking it again.
Jeez.
And yeah, because if fear starts to get in your head. And so after the 2 heart attacks in one day and the clotting of the stent, because the stent's actually impregnated with material to stop it from allowing things to clot to it. They're the next generation of stents. So they're pretty advanced.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they're perfect. And like Kendrick would say, if you push that stent into the wall, the endothelial cells just one cell layer thick. The progenitor endothelial cells that your marrow produces will come along your bloodstream and they will patch over top of it, creating a uniform line of single cells of endothelial cells. And that probably happens within the first 90 days or less, probably much faster, but I'm being broad there at that. So I come out of that third surgery and I literally felt like someone had run me over with a truck. I felt like a geriatric. I felt like an old man. I was crushed. I thought, if this is the life that I'm going to have, that I can't pick up my daughters, I can't go for a run, I can't work out, then I don't know if this is a life worth living, which is probably a pretty negative attitude to have because there's a lot of things a person could still do. But they started to inundate me also with the idea that I had cardiac insufficiency. I was down to 38% left ventricle ejection fraction, that I should get ready for cardiac failure over time. And then they put me on the best meds money could buy, which was costing me like $450 a month. It was insane. The Brilinta, which is the replacement for Plavix, and they just changed all my meds. It's probably too much to go into right here, although I think at some point it'd probably be good for people to hear either you or I or both of us speak on our differing experiences with the meds and what some of the consequences are, because neither of us being cardiologists, but we can share our story and maybe help people ask the right questions of their people.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me and so for me then began a really long journey where my cardiac function didn't really change for probably 6 to 8 months. And I mentioned it briefly in our pre-talk, but the job I took after I think I had my second and third heart attack December 4th, I went to work in Curacao in the Dutch Antilles on the 28th or 29th of January. And I ran the national COVID response team for the Dutch Antilles in Curacao for 5 months. And I saw another cardiologist there who did exactly the same thing when he saw me coming in with angina, because I was running really long days running that team. He said, "Oh, no, there's no way you're having a heart attack. And there's no way you're having any problems," and kind of ignored me and blew me off, sent me home. And then when I came back with worse chest pain later, they put me in, they did what you did to you, which is they did 3 rounds of troponin testing and saw that the troponin levels were low and that's probably I was just overstressed. And so then sent me home. I wasn't using my nitro. Very, very rarely would I use it. And then I started training. When I first went to Curacao, I had just received a product called the Frontier X, which is a chest strap that is like a combination of the fourth and fifth lead of a 12K EKG or 12 lead AKG. And I use their cardiac program where they have every week, they have a guy that looks in a cardiac rehab specialist that looks at all of your EKGs and then gives you exercise recommendations, which I thought was super useful for just having a dialogue around. Even though it was retrospective, the tool doesn't help you. It doesn't tell you if you're training that, hey, you're having a heart attack, maybe you should go to a hospital. It doesn't tell you that, but you can set limits on it, like for breathing rate, pulse, blah, 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 blah. I found it a useful tool. And I think using that to moderate training and manage my training consistently really helped, because by the time I left Curacao and came back, I think I left Curacao in May. Then in June, but got tested here in Canada, and my left ventricle ejection fraction was up to 50 to 55.
Oh, nice.
So 55, yeah, 55 is the bottom end of normals. The normal range is 55 to 70. And that was a pretty impressive change. It's I think less than 1/3 of cardiac heart attack survivors see an improvement in cardiac function post MI. 1/3 stay the same and 1/3 deteriorate. That's the last set of statistics that I looked at. So yeah, it's been a journey to try and figure out what is the right exercise load. I think the right exercise load is key. I think thyroid function is key. I think the LDL cholesterol hypothesis is a bag of crap. I mean, look, if you look at the stats, the more you lower cholesterol, the higher the rate of all-cause mortality. So that's scary. And statins seem to increase life expectancy in relation to heart attacks by, I think, at best 4 days. But they exactly
$billion industry.
Yeah, and we're going to charge you billions of dollars, but we're going to give you on average 4 extra days of life. Oh, by the way, in exchange, not only for those billions of dollars, but an increased rate of cancer
and diabetes.
Yeah, especially with some of the drugs. What's interesting, what I have not been able to parse out. A lot of the conversation around statins has shifted from, yes, there's an acknowledgement of all these other issues with the statins. Oh, but by the way, there's something that's improving outcomes here with statins, and it looks like it might have an effect on inflammation. And in the case of statins like rovastatin, that looks like it helps with endothelial function. Okay, well, where's the evidence of that? Like, I have not stopped. Like, I resisted statins altogether, and then I was some concerns came up, and I decided to try 5 milligrams twice a day of rovastatin, because there's no associated risk of diabetes with that, and the chances of the negative side effects I was worried about, I haven't had to worry. I think they're so low, but the idea that I could maybe have an impact on inflammation is good, because my situation is a little bit different than yours. And it was like a light bulb moment when I read Kendrick, when he talks about corticosteroids, or steroids, I should say. That to me was an oh shit moment. Why? Because in my early years, I used performance enhancing drugs as an athlete. And then when I stopped doing that, I had a problem with natural production. So I've been on HRT for 20 years. The problem with that, your normal pulsatile nature of testosterone has a very short window of effectiveness. So sometime in the middle of the night, you get this pulse of testosterone that quickly has its effect in the system. Maybe, I can't remember the numbers, but let's say 6 to 8 hours or something. Then other hormones do their thing in a cycle. Our cycle is daily. Female cycles are 28 days or 21 days or whatever it is. But by the nature of testosterone, injectable testosterone, let's say, as it's used typically in HRT, these drugs tend to have a 7, 8, 9, 10-day half-life. So you're getting this early peak and then this long wane or ebb. Well, what am I doing? If you think about it from Kendrick's hypothesis, I'm dysregulating HPA all the time. So that, on top of the fact that my genetics, when I got genetics, again, genetics, Kendrick laughs at genetics, and he probably has a point, because genetics is probably an expression of the previous 3, 4, 5 generations, what been exposed to, like an epigenetics kind of thing. But I've probably, I have bad genetics in that I have the heart attack gene from both sides. And then I've dysregulated HPA by taking a hormone replacement therapy for 20 years. So I probably added to the risk and drove a slow growth of my arterial plaque with those choices, on top of a very high stress lifestyle. I think if you combine those things, that all starts to make sense. And where it ties back for both of us, I think, is realizing, how do we unravel, like, we're fit guys, we've taken care of ourselves, we've done a lot, and that's been a main focus in our lives. So we ended up in this place that we're like totally surprised by now. How do we undo it?
Yeah.
Unlike you,
what can we do? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's,
because you want to do something, that's like, if you're like, yeah, that was my thing too. Okay, I've been doing all this great stuff for myself. What can I do? I want to fight this, I don't want to just sit around and wait for my next heart attack.
And tell me, what, if you don't mind shifting gears, I've done a lot of talking. What have you found are the things to do to reduce your risk or undo however it is you got to your heart attack?
Well, I believe mine is all stress related. And even though I also have a father that had quintuple bypass surgery when he was 61, and then went on to have 4 more heart attacks, but lived till 86, unbelievably.
Wow.
He passed away in 2010. But I believe, that my inability to handle stress also was something that I learned from him. So I don't believe it's heart disease that get passed on. I believe it's an inability to handle stress that's taught and handed down. I don't know if you ever looked into Gabor Mate at all. He's Canadian. He's Canadian, actually.
I've heard of him, but I'm trying to remember where I've heard of him.
Well, he had a film coming out there about trauma, and his whole thing is, he's got ADHD, but he basically believes that ADHD, addiction, stress responses, everything is handed down through generations that we learn, from our parents or our dad. And it made sense to me. I saw how my dad handled his stress, which was keep everything in, and he never even talk about it. He rarely even showed anger. But I was, yeah. So that's what I believe. I believe that it was not the heart disease that handed down. It was the lack of tools to handle stress. So my focus has been this exploration of anything I can do to lower stress. And that was part of my decision to go off my meds, because I realized to do something about my stress, I need to feel stress, which I didn't on these drugs with the beta blockers and the all the ones I can't even remember. I had the one for lowering blood pressure or whatever. You don't feel stress, right? I'm just like wandering around like a zombie,
Yeah.
So at first I did that, and then I just focused on stress with meditation, just on an app like Headspace, and nothing fancy. And then I, read more and more about cold water immersion, and there's actually a Danish researcher that has done the first research on winter bathers, they're called, in Denmark. And where they measure their cortisol levels in the daytime and in the nighttime, and they're quite a lot lower than the average person. you know.
That's great.
So she's put out this research showing all the health benefits of cold water immersion. So I started doing that. So this morning I got in the harbor, 1 degree Celsius water, and I
Good
do
man.
that. I do that every morning, and that really is like been amazing, because it's also the process of getting in this stressful. And I don't know if you've ever done cold water immersion, but you know, you want it to go like that. And when you
Yeah,
relax into it and just accept it, it really transfers to other stressors, you know, in your life.
I
Now
agree.
my wife's doing it, which is a
I
miracle.
saw that
She
on your
said,
Instagram page.
I will never do it. I joke with her in the morning, hey, should we go out for a swim? I will never get in that cold water. So her whole thing is in the summer, it took her 20 minutes to get in the water. But she's actually doing it. She loves it, you know. Um,
Yeah, I saw the
so
video
yeah,
on your Instagram. That's awesome. I
yeah,
saw her getting in. I thought couples, what'd you call it? Couples cryotherapy or something? It was brilliant.
yeah, cold water couples therapy. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Because it
cold
was
water. Yeah.
too, it's also, you know, when you're in there, when you come out, it increases your dopamine levels by 250%. This is another thing that this Danish researcher has uncovered. So you really have this, you know, and to
Yeah.
share that together is quite nice, you know.
I think that there's a lot said for, I'm still exploring that. I don't know if you've ever read anything by Dr. Ray Peat. There's an interesting community there that I've been a part of for a long time. And they are, you know, they're not pro, for example, extreme heat or cold exposure, but it's interesting to read other people's views,
Mm,
because at the same time, you know, you see what people like Wim Hof and his adherents have accomplished. You see that there's lots of research on cold exposure and heat shock proteins in saunas. In fact, it's something I'd really like to
mm.
try. I haven't done a legit sauna, high temperature, for a long time, but I'm fascinated by it. It's something I'm researching. I find it's, have you ever noticed that when you're researching something, there's often two sides to this. Like there's all this research on one side and all this research on another side.
Yeah,
Trying to parse out where the truth lies
yeah,
is such a nightmare.
yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, because I have, you know, my sister reached out to me because she's seeing someone that deals with trauma and everything like that, and stress and stuff like that. And they, this guy says he doesn't think the cold water is good for you. You know, it's a real stressor. You don't need more stress. And I said, well, I mean, because what I've, at least this Danish researcher, what she talks about is that it's not chronic stress. That's the difference.
Bingo.
And you
It's an
need,
acute dose.
exactly, it's an acute dose, and you work towards bringing it down, you know. So it's like training, you know, it's like lifting weights, you know, but for keeping the stress down. So that's been my focus, is anything that, you know, reduces stress.
What are your go-to
I go for
tools? Cold water,
cold
micro.
water, meditation. Yeah, I changed the way I worked out because I was a CrossFit cuckoo head, you know, competitive masters, and I would do these, you know, 2.5 hour workouts 6 days a week. I mean, completely insane. And I realized after the heart attack, when I went back to that, when I got home, I was finished for the day, you know. Again, you know, all the medication and that, you know, I was really useless to my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
And it was actually the first lockdown from coronavirus that we had in Denmark that, you know, I couldn't go to the gym and I was really not motivated. I said, well, let me swing a kettlebell. You know, I had done it years ago, and I thought, you know, I'll do it throughout the day, because I'll break it up throughout the day, because I thought maybe it'll give me a mental lift. And it really did, because I was quite depressed at the first, because my whole business was in the gym, everything was shut down. And I was very one of these people that thought this is not going to get better, you know. These kind of things are going to keep on coming. So I moved my whole business to training people outside, which is all I do now. And and I do it myself in all weather, as you've seen. And this, and doing it, I was thinking back, as you have bodybuilder past? You're a
Some
bodybuilder?
bodybuilder,
What is
but
it?
I've been swinging the kettlebell since 2002, and I did
Okay. All right. Yeah.
since
Yeah.
2004, and then I went
Yeah.
away from it when it kind of went all. But it just seemed to double down on going extreme, right? Like it
Oh, yeah.
stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, yeah, then but like I remember reading back in the day that Schwarzenegger used to do these, he'd do these crazy workouts and then go eat a whole pizza. It was this carb backloading,
uh,
that all the calories go to muscle repair if you do it that way. And I thought, well, then why not just do a little workout before every meal? And that was my idea for the micro workouts. So I thought of it as a meal ticket, to do this workout. And did the kettlebell swings and paired it like a bodybuilding workout, really, where with a leg day, a push day, and a pull day. And well, from swinging a kettlebell for so many years, there's something magical about kettlebell swings that they still don't know what it is. They call it the what the hell effect, right? You pair anything with a kettlebell swing and that thing gets better, exponentially
yeah,
faster.
awful.
And I think part of it is just this thing of like you say, like if I'm swinging a 32 kilo kettlebell, well, at some points in the swing, it's 32 kilos, but when it's swinging down and I'm switching direction between my legs, that's a lot heavier than 32 kilos, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
so I think that's part of it, is just the way the loading is, and the fact that it's loading up your posterior chain, which is the largest muscles in your body. And I think it really is giving you a hit of hormones by doing that, and then
Sure.
pairing it with other exercises. It's been so effective. I'm telling you, I now train. These are 2-minute workouts. I train 8 minutes a day, 7 days a week. So 56 minutes of lifting weights. And I'm like, my wife was like, you're jacked. When I started doing this, I thought, maybe there's something to this. So I'm
Yeah.
doing that, and I'm trying to get out there and run 3 times a week, which has been tough when I did the masters. But I wanted to touch on one thing you said, because one thing I did too is I got a wearable device like you did. I use the Whoop band, but I use HRV to. That's my guide for training. I never go over, if I'm in the red, that's it.
Yeah.
Rest day. I take complete rest, and I don't do anything. I don't even go in the water, actually, because of a stress if I'm in the red, because it's a great measurement of how your overall stress is. So I really use the HRV as a guide to what training I'm going to do that day. And I try to always, it tries to tell you, oh, you should do a more strenuous workout on that. And I never do that. I'm just like, I like to be recovered and feeling good and not overreaching, and that's my philosophy. Like you mentioned, how am I going to train after this, because I really, which is hard for me, because I like to be, you have experience with this too, I'm sure, the strong old guy, you get a reputation, and it's very tough for me to let go and just be like, okay, I'm just training for longevity. I want to live a long time. I want to keep some muscle. I don't have to be the strongest old guy in the world, So
That
I
is
have to
that
talk
is
myself
hard.
down. Yeah.
That is hard. The ego gets in the way. I've really struggled with. I don't know if your body changed a lot post MI, but did you suffer any significant changes, like in terms of physical size or strength after your heart attack?
Well, yeah, mine was a little different, because I went, my heart stopped. So my heart,
Incredible.
yeah,
Jesus.
my heart, I didn't have a steady pulse for over 40 minutes. You can believe that. And I only have the brain. I suffered a bit of hypoxic brain damage. So having had a little problem in school last week, actually, which was tough. For the first time it hit me, where I couldn't bring facts up, and I did very poorly on an oral exam. And I took that very hard. But it
Good
was
thing it's fully recoverable, right? Have you read Norman Doidge's The Brain That Changes Itself?
no.
Put
Send
that
me
on your
that because I'm interested. Yeah, yeah.
I will
I think
send
it's
it.
helping me that I'm going back to school, because it's really my brain's really, wasn't sure I'd be able to do that, but I'm doing pretty well except for this oral exam. But it was this kind of thing of like stump the student,
Hmm.
with questions, and that didn't work out too well. But yeah, because it stopped completely like that, and then when I mentioned that in the last blog, they thought they were sending away a dead guy. They didn't think I would, they hooked me up to this machine that was a piston on there.
Yeah,
And then when they rolled me into the hospital, I had a weak pulse. It's just, don't know
incredible.
why. So it was real tough coming back. Well, first of all, they put me in a medically induced coma for 4 days. So I didn't move at all. And then when I did start moving, it was very slow. My kids called me baby robot because I was like, yeah, thanks a lot. And I still do it. If I can't find a word, they're still like, they look at me, okay, baby robot.
I love it, man.
So I lost like 8 kilos of, muscle. So I was really building back, and I had the ego thing you talk about. I had the thing, I'm going to get this strength back, and I was like, I kept, keep building up and lift heavier deadlifts. And people are looking at me in the gym like, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
And I built it back up, and I did a 200 kilo deadlift one day, probably 3 months after this all happened. And then COVID hit. And that may have saved my life the way I was going back at it. And then there was a chance for me to reassess. All right, what am I doing here? But I have to keep doing that to myself, because I have this thing where I'm so competitive, and I want to keep pushing myself, and I want to stay strong. And I have to constantly be like, okay. I mean, what happened to me recently is I had a colleague, unfortunately, that died in New York at 48. And that really got me thinking again, okay, this is about my heart. This is about longevity. Let me refocus again and get out running again and make that a focus, some gentle runs. But I have to keep doing that,
That's what I found too. Exactly what you've said. The ego is the enemy. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And there's probably a sweet spot. I lost very similar weight to you. I'm probably down anywhere from 10 to 12 kilograms. Although my waist size is smaller as well, which is good, I think, overall, looking at those statistics. But it's the same thing.
You had a lot of muscle. I saw some older pictures. You were probably, were you 105 kilos or something? Or?
I was walking around at 115 kilos.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
yeah.
All right. Oh, so you must be tall too then.
6'1", 183 centimeters.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So not giant or anything. I certainly have been a lot bigger in the past, but for my age, I was definitely walking around in good shape. But again, part of that's chemically induced in the sense that I'm maintaining a higher than normal testosterone level.
Oh, yeah.
That was adjusting and moving away from the heavier training and really lowering that dose to a really as low as possible while I explore options to move away from that entirely. Has really caused a big drop in weight. I'm walking around now at about 102 kilograms with a much smaller waist. Instead of wearing like a size 38 pant, I'm wearing a size 34. So those are all positive changes, I think. And I do a lot more training now for cardiovascular capacity, looking at the structural changes that happen to the heart based on cardiovascular training versus training with weights. So one of the things that was surprising to me in looking at is that, you understand that the heart thickness increases when you lift really heavy loads, but it also looks like that doesn't necessarily grow the internal space of the left ventricle, you know, that's going to give you your stroke volume. Actually, if you don't do enough cardio, it looks like you may actually shrink that space as the cell muscle gets thicker or the walls get thicker. Whereas when you train cardiovascular capacity, you get this ballooning effect of the heart. So stroke volume increases, hence the idea that efficiency gets better. And the wall doesn't necessarily get any thicker. It just gets more efficient at contracting, and it gets that more of a ballooning effect. So I think having a balance between, I spent a lot of time training strength, and I believe that taking the time to train cardiovascular is really critical. I've been trying to find the sweet spot. I work 12-hour days when I'm away at work. I work 7 days a week. Before Christmas, I spent 7 weeks straight away at 12-hour days. And by the time I would leave work and train for 2 hours, 45 minutes of cardio, and then 45 minutes of weight, some cool down, some warm up, like I said, you're 2 hours. It's pretty hard to do that consistently and get enough sleep. So I found that I'm having now to like, okay, I'll do 45 minutes of cardio at about 130-ish beats a minute for 45 minutes, or the bulk of 45 minutes. And 1 day a week, so 20% of my cardiovascular training, I will do an intense session pushing 200 watts on a cycle for basically 5 sets of 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off. So basically it's a 4-minute sprint where I'm trying to hit about 150 beats a minute to really kind of push the envelope on the heart rate, and then give it 4 minutes of rest, and then repeat that 5 times. And I find when I do that, I'm like done. And I'm still questioning the value of that. Like, I want to see, I'm still studying to figure out if that is the right way to go from a cardiovascular perspective, because I also, there's a voice in my head that says workouts should energize you. You should leave the workout feeling better than when you started. And if you're feeling exhausted, you've probably gone too far. And yet the counter argument is, how do I get the heart to remodel in a good way? Because there's a part of my heart that doesn't move very well. It's a small part. Yeah. And I think that looking at deep at the research, and there's not a lot of really great answers, but it looks like in young people, the heart has about a 1% regenerative capacity per year. And at our age demographic, probably 0.5%. So how do we protect that? Because I think that's probably really closely linked to thyroid function, and thyroid function is poorly understood or monitored by most physicians. I mean, looking at TSH and accepting a high TSH is probably not a good way to manage it. I think body temperature, pulse, a look at a whole bunch of tests might be a better way of doing that. I don't know. And then I try to train with weights, but I don't try to overdo it.
Yeah, it's interesting what you talk about a workout really wasting you, because that's what I love about the micro workouts, that they do energize me. But the running is very tough for me. I mean, I'm going out on 3K runs and I'm going really easy, and that still wipes me out. I'll take a shower and a nap for an hour afterwards, and it's like, I know I need to do this additional cardio, but yeah, I'm struggling with that too, because I think, is this really good for me? I'm really, especially now I'm running with a client once a week, and we go a little bit longer, 7 kilometers, something like that. And that's the one where I'm done. I'm done for the rest of the day after that. And it leaves me feeling, I'm wondering if it's so good.
Well, it takes a lot more juice. It takes a lot more effort to run than it does to cycle. And the advantage, I think, in where you live is it's predominantly flat, so you can maintain a pace. Whereas where I live, it's a lot of hills and ups and downs. So being outside on a cycle or running, you can't lock in a load. So a cycle for me, indoor cycle, where I can set the tension, or I can set the wattage, or an elliptical or whatever, even a treadmill where I can crank the incline to a certain level until I hit a load that I can maintain. allows me to better set that, because what I think is what's needed, and again, I'm not an exercise physiologist, so talk to one if you want to know, but I'm not giving medical advice. I don't intend to anyways, but I find that I think that consistent load at a higher level of heart rate is probably, for what window, I don't know. I've read a lot that at least 30 minutes, more likely 45 minutes, and sometimes an hour, at least 3 times a week type thing, or depending on the heart rate you're going to go at, that duration should happen. So 80% of your training should be done at a lower level and 20% should be done at a higher level to kind of push that change. One is develop capacity, like building a gas tank, and the other one is extending the gas tank, so to speak. I don't know enough about it to be really, really sure. And once I get another ejection fraction done, let's say in another 6 months, I'll have a better idea if any of the things I've done it'll be hard to say, to pinpoint, because I've thrown so much at this. Like I'm meditating and using, for me, I use HRV on a Polar. If you look at the research on Polar, they're what they call nightly recharge HRV tools seems to be the best in the industry. It learns, it's got a learning algorithm, so it's constantly measuring you against past performance. And it's been excellent in my idea. Like you, if it tells me that I slept poorly and hence my ANS, autonomic nervous system, has not had any recovery, and it tells me go easy, or it tells me not to train, I don't train. And it's been really good for helping me see what things are impacting my sleep, because I tend to train in the evening. I used to train in the morning, but with the workload, it's been really hard to get up at 3:30 to train, to be able to be at work for a 7 o'clock start. So I think tools like that for people in our situation are super, super useful, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of how much stress they're carrying. And I think it's good to have an objective tool that can tell you, hey, buddy, this is not the
going on here.
You don't need to be tough today. This isn't about proving how tough you are. You need to actually get some extra rest. And like you, I think the running takes so many more muscles than cycling. It's hard to figure out the dose, but this kind of thing can help us. And I think it's obviously something we're both dealing with.
Yeah. I just want to mention one thing too, because I remember one thing that I've changed, because we talked a bit about Thich Nhat Hanh. And he talks about he's got a book about anger too, and
cool.
And he talks about that when you're angry, there's some people like you want to pound a pillow, or like me, lift heavy weights. And anger fueled so many of my workouts. Mostly angry that I'm not lifting this the way I want to, but I got very angry as I'm doing these workouts. And he talks about that if you do that and do something physical while you're angry, you're actually rehearsing the anger, like in your nervous system. And I was like, that's interesting. I never heard that before from a monk, a Vietnamese monk, But I see a lot of people do that. I really do it myself. And I think that was part of my problem too. I always say, I think CrossFit was part of my problem, but it was the way I did CrossFit, which was really angry, really competitive with other people, really competitive with myself. And always coming home, like my wife would always say, I don't think this is good for you. You come home, you're very unhappy and you're exhausted, and a lot of it is the emotional toll of that. I felt, oh God, that sucked. I should have done better. I should have done this. I should have done that, So I've really let go of all that in terms of training. And I don't do any training angry. If I'm angry, I'll do something else, jump in the cold water.
Message, man. That is a powerful, powerful message. Wow, that resonates a lot, because I've fought angry. I've done a lot of things angry. I've driven myself to do a lot of hard things with anger as a whip or as a spur.
Yeah, me too.
And yet I've always looked at the guys, especially MMA is kind of my sport. And I remember always being very kind of intrigued. The Russian view on it is completely different. You see a Russian come into a ring or a cage, and their face is like
It's like, whoop.
totally calm. It's like, I'm going shopping for groceries. Oh, I'm being punched in the face. I'm punching you in the face. And it's like the face doesn't change, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you just go, they're not. Which of these coaches wrote a book talking about this? It talks about, it's something I used to use in my coaching practice, is that they're not, the athlete that seems to be more successful is the one that's not invested in the outcome of any particular, I'm trying to sink the ball in the net or in the hoop, and like, oh, I made it, great, or I did or not, doesn't matter to me. I didn't make it, I missed, no problem, great, not great, don't care, just do the next one, do the next one, do the next one, not tied to the outcome. And they then not like, yeah, I made it, or oh God, I suck, I missed. They're not either of those. And I think that's part.
That's not me. That's not me.
Yeah, I'm with you too. That really resonates, buddy. Thank you for sharing that.
But I think we should wrap up today. We've been over an hour here, but
Oh wow.
let's keep talking, you and me. I hope you're up for that,
Sure.
because I think we have actually a scary amount of things in common here, including
Sure.
2 daughters, which we didn't get into.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to make a shout out for wives. My wife is also told me, call the doc. I was really grumpy. What's the matter with you? I've had this pain in my chest. Call the doctor right now.
How did your wife handle the? I'd love to hear the comparison between the wives' stories too. How did your wife handle? Was she with you at the mall when you actually collapsed?
No, unfortunately, well, who knows what's better, but she just got a phone call from the doctor that was working on me, and she was on a public bus, and yeah,
What a way to get
your
the news.
husband's collapsed. She said, "Is he breathing?" And then she had to hear, "No."
Oh
we're,
my.
we're doing everything we can. So she really had, it was rough. It was rough.
Before we end, maybe something that your listeners and I certainly think anybody that's maybe paying attention to us in this space should hear, because it worries me a lot. It's been on my mind lately. So breast cancer gets a lot of attention. And, in the United States, you'll see football teams with pink helmets and, ribbons on the side. And that's wonderful. And I think it's important. It doesn't take away from the importance of breast cancer research and the risks of breast cancer. But heart disease kills 10 times more women than breast cancer. It is poorly diagnosed because most of the symptoms that women get when they're having a heart attack seem to be very similar to PMS symptoms. So they're not taken seriously when they go into a hospital or an ER. There's almost no research on MIs in women. Almost all the research is on men, and the hormonal profiles are vastly different. And so to me, that's something that I think is really, although neither one of us is a woman, both of us are married to women and have daughters and came from women, and we're surrounded by females that are important to us, and nobody's talking about this. And I think it's really important that message also get out.
Yeah, I agree.
Another topic for us on another day.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. This has been so great. I could keep talking for 2 more hours, but
pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.
But we'll keep in touch, and we'll talk soon.
I look forward to it.
Okay, thanks a lot, man.
All right, man. If you have a moment after this, I have something to drop with you.
Oh shoot! What would I do here? Oh my God! I hit the wrong button. Let me just see here.